just record. There we go. Right, we're ready to kickstart this very rainy Wednesday and cold Wednesday here in Joburg, but welcome everybody. Another Wednesday, another webinar with the Philotimor Cancer Project. A little introduction before we start off. I'm Evie Michaelopoulos. I'm the founder and the CEO of the Mahi Philotimor Cancer Project. Joining us today is John Kombinos, co-founder.
Hi everyone, nice to see you all again.
Thank you, John. And today we have a special guest, one of our amazing cancer navigators, or actually our cancer navigator, if I could say, Nicole Fuller. She's going to be joining us today, and the topic we're going to get chatty about is cervical cancer. Traditionally, January is Cervical Cancer Awareness Month. So we thought we'd end off January with this awareness around cervical cancer. Unfortunately, one of our champions that was going to join us today has an oncology appointment, so she's not able to join us on our webinar, but we will share the webinar on our pages, our web pages, so you can go and cross-reference to. But enough about that. Let's head over to Nicole. Nicole, a little bit of an intro. If you can just tell our listeners who you are and what you do, and then we'll go straight into the topic. If anybody has any questions, please send us a chat at the bottom or raise your hand and we can answer them through the presentation. But let's kickstart. So over to you, Nicole. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nicole Fuller. I am an oncology patient navigator. I'm now a partner with Evie and John with Philotimor. I was trained in oncology patient navigation through the Breast Health Foundation under Prof. Ben and the Breast Health Foundation, as well as some international courses. I do have a fair knowledge about all the other cancers. I have also joined the Cancer Association as a volunteer. So I have just actually recently completed their training in breast, cervical, prostate, skin, and colorectal cancers. So I do have quite a fair knowledge on the other types of cancers, not just breast cancer. I'm also a member of the We Can Africa Forum, which is it's actually an American organization, but with very strong ties in We Can Africa Forum, and they are advocates for breast and cervical cancer in Africa or in the world. But they predominantly are working towards cervical cancer elimination in Africa and breast cancer awareness. And I'm also on the Advocates for Breast Cancer South African group, which also we do a lot of breast, but we also do we're also trying to do more cervical cancer awareness and and making people aware of cervical cancer and that it can be eliminated. So that's a little bit on my background. So yeah, we can go ahead.
Awesome, thank you. So let's head to it. If you can just take us through some of your notes that you have, your presentation.
Okay.
And as in when sorry to interrupt you. If we get people to let them come through.
Question.
Okay. Questions. Thanks, Nicole.
Okay, so cervical cancer, like most other cancers, obviously, if it's caught early detection is key, and then it is obviously highly treatable and preventable. Unfortunately, in sub-Saharan Africa, cervical cancer is actually the biggest killer of women after breast cancer. And, cervical cancer is transmitted sexually, and the cause of that is the HPV virus. So often, because of in the low middle income countries, because, healthcare is not easily accessible or affordable, this is why there are such, high rates of cervical cancer. And even though it's a slow growing cancer, it's often detected very late. And then, it is, of course, more difficult to treat and of course becomes, a huge problem. So the HPV virus is the virus that causes cervical cancer. And, many women in a lifetime may get HPV, but there are different types of the HPV strains. And the strains that cause cervical cancer, dangerous cervical cancer, are strain 16, 18, 35, and 45. And then the strain 6 and 11 cause genital warts, and which are also, sexually transmitted and can be orally transmitted too. It's called, I think the oral one is called laryngeal papillomatosis is the condition. So, of course, one really great thing about cervical cancer today is that it actually can be eliminated because they have the HPV vaccines. And, I think the biggest problem is making people aware. So, I mean, the most important thing is to have regular screenings because then it will prevent cervical cancer from getting to any of the later stages. And as we know, I mean, privately, we can have a pap smear and an HPV test every year. Our medical aids pay. And I think the recommended in state is at least every 3 years to be screened. And I mean, the screening needs to start quite young. So if you are sexually active, as early as you do become sexually active, if you're 18 or 20, is, to start the screening, and then obviously to go right through, to keep checking. So, the HPV vaccine is rolled out. Well, in Africa now, they're trying to make it standard. And I think in a lot of countries it is. In our own country, the government does supply to the government schools, the state schools, and they can vaccinate girls and boys, although they don't do the boys yet, but they vaccinate the girls specifically to prevent cervical between the ages of 9 and 12. And they have rolled that out in our state schools. Unfortunately, they don't do this for the boys yet. And, so you have to pay for the vaccines privately. Then the vaccines there's 2 vaccines. There's the Cervarix vaccine, which is specifically only for cervical cancer, the HPV strain 16 and 18. And then the Gardasil vaccine, which is much more advanced, and that covers the 6 and 11 and the 8, 16. So that also cervical cancer, vulvar cancer, vaginal cancer, and then the genital warts, which are caused by 16 and caused by 6 and 11. So, I think it's just so important to make everyone aware, especially if you've got daughters, the importance of and educating teenagers on safe sex practices, boys and girls. Because cervical cancer is also, it's not only caused, via the sexual organs, but also orally. So oral sex is also a route to, and then it causes cervical causes, it gets transmitted to the throat via oral sex, and it causes head and neck cancers, which are growing very rapidly, at quite a rapid rate at the moment. I think in America, it's one of the biggest growing cancers are the head and neck cancers, which we're seeing more and more of, and it's possibly because of the whole oral sex route. So it's just so important to, I think, educate teenagers on safe sex practices and make them aware that this can occur, and to implore with parents that to vaccinate both their boys and their girls as early as possible. And then HPV, some women might develop HPV, but if they don't develop the strains that cause it, you will be fine. And often, early stage cervical cancer is a precancerous condition. So again, if it's caught early, it's, highly, highly, highly treatable. And, the best way to prevention is to have the HPV vaccine, and then your regular pap smears and the HIV testing. I don't know if anyone's got any questions yet, or
let's just have a look. Any questions that we can ask Nicole so far? No? Looks like we can carry on, Nicole.
Okay. So yeah, like I've said, I think it's also the World Health Organization, I think in November, launched a whole project to actually try to eliminate cervical cancer by 2030. And of course, this is quite a big task, especially in Africa. But in the European countries and in America, because of good screening and prevention, cervical cancer is less and less and less now. So it's not very common anymore in Europe and America. But of course, I think, in Africa, it is still a big problem. Well, or low, as I mentioned earlier, low to middle income countries who don't have access to, to the screening and prevention, and then it's diagnosed late.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's, like I say, so the World Health Organization are doing a whole project to try and eliminate by, obviously, of course, promoting the HPV vaccine and making it almost compulsory for every school-going girl and boy, and to be vaccinated. That is, like I say, I think it's one of the few cancers that you can say could possibly can be eliminated because of the HPV vaccines. So I don't know if there's anything else on.
So I think
questions on.
Maybe perhaps, Nicole, what we can do is there different types of cervical cancer, or is it just one standard?
Well, it depends on obviously the early staging. So if you get an early stage, then it's highly treatable. Like I say, the different strains are the 16 and 18 strains and the 6 and 11 strains. I think cervical cancer is cervical cancer, and then obviously, the treatment is pretty much like standard cancer treatment. So, if it's caught early, they can treat it with antibiotics. They can, they do what they call a cone biopsy. They do a colposcopy, which is a visual screening that they look at the cervix through like a special camera thing. And they can do surgical cone biopsy and ablation. And then, of course, if it is advanced, then it's treated with radiation, internal and external radiation. They also do a kind of a brachytherapy for cervical cancer, like they do for prostate. External radiation beam chemotherapy, immunotherapy. So it's all the standard cancer treatments, and then of course it's staged from stage 1, 2, 3, and 4, and obviously each stage it's either more aggressive or it is spread to more organs in the surrounding areas of the cervix.
Okay. And are there any symptoms that people can look out for that they experience, or if they do experience certain symptoms that they should be aware of having this exam done?
I think that the earliest symptoms is if you have a abnormal pap test. Of course, that's an indication. If you have abnormal discharge, vaginal discharge, if you have bleeding, very heavy bleeding between periods, can be a symptom. And, often these, people just sort of think, oh, well, this is just, part of my menstrual cycle, and they often leave it. And that's why I think it's so important that they need to, to be aware of those and to be checked out if they do have those kind of symptoms early, to rather go to your GP or your gynecologist and get them checked out. Because, and then I think obviously, I think as it progresses, then there's more severe symptoms, abdominal pain, lower back pain, if it spreads to other organs, bone pain, so it obviously progresses more. But like I say, the best way is to have regular pap smears, I think, because they will pick up any abnormal changes immediately. If there is an abnormal change or a precancerous change. And, I think something to make people aware of is that because of HIV infection, it actually increases the risk of HPV. And HPV women can be diagnosed, I think it's 14 years earlier than normal women can be diagnosed with HPV because of the whole impact of HPV on the immune system. And, so it's far more, so HPV patients are far more susceptible to getting cervical cancer as well. Okay. So it's,
Okay. And we've spoken briefly about the causes and the types, risk factors you mentioned a little bit earlier. An interesting risk factor that I came across was also smoking. How does smoking, if you can answer, play a role in terms
of I think smoking, like in so many other lifestyle factors, can contribute or, be a contribute to causing cancer. I don't think there's an absolute direct link, but I think you're more at risk if you are a smoker, like you would be for a lot of the other cancers, colorectal, breast, lung, prostate, smoking, can be a predisposition, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's a direct cause, but I think it doesn't help to smoke it,
Yeah, it can cause it. And another question that I had is obviously the smoking, which we've answered. And then you mentioned earlier having routine pap tests, recommended once a year. How often should people go? I mean, we know regularly we should go once a year to have these done. Is once a year sufficient?
No, once a year is very sufficient. And I think we're very lucky that if we can do once a year, because like I mentioned in state, if you can't afford to, there is a cervical cancer policy, and they are supposed to do it in 3-year intervals, and especially if you're high risk, if you're a high risk patient. But I think being on private medical aid, I would recommend that. I'm sure Discovery do pay. I mean, I know I have to go yearly and my medical aid pay, but I think it might be, also because of my oncology, because I'm on tamoxifen, which has a slight risk of uterine cancer. So, I have regular checks, and I make sure I have my pap check every year. I'm sure that the privates do pay, it's either every year or every second year that the private medical aids do. And I mean, I think it's so important that women do go and, if you can, is to have it, because it's just, and then, you've got to request the HPV test to be done with the pap smear if you want to be tested. And I think it's often at the gynae's discretion, but you can ask, to be checked for HPV strains as well, when you have your checkups.
And Nicole, we spoke earlier about being able to give these vaccines to school-going kids. So what is the youngest age that a vaccine should be given to a girl or a guy? I mean, it
can be as young as 9 years old, and the most important thing is that it's obviously preferable to have the vaccine before anyone becomes sexually active, because it will then not be as effective if you are already sexually active. And I mean, that's another thing we can discuss is you just have to make people aware that. So if you have a lot of sexual partners, you're at higher risk. But you may sleep with a guy who you don't know has had many sexual partners, and you think, and you sleep with that guy once, and you might develop that strain. So it's so imperative to educate people that safe sex and not having a lot of sexual partners, men or women, it can be transmitted, like I say, orally and via the sexual organs. And I think also, it's through the orally and sexually through the organs. And I mean, so if you are going to be promiscuous, your risks are very high. But I mean, you might have it's with a once off, and and you might be unlucky and you get that. But that's why I think it's so imperative that people are educated on safe sex, not too many sexual partners, whether you're male or female. Children with oral sex, they think, well, if they have oral sex, they're safe. And I mean, that is not the case. And, I don't think a lot of teenagers or even parents are aware of that.
Yeah. And you mentioned about the age. There's a lot of people that say, they've heard about the vaccine, and they've heard that it's actually bad. There's side effects. Is there anything that you know of for those people that are out there that are debating whether or not to give it to their daughters or their sons because they've heard rumors that it's a side effect?
That is, that's another whole situation, because we have people that are pro-vaccine and are anti-vaccines. And I mean, I have read up, my oldest son has been vaccinated, and he had absolutely no side effects. He had the Gardasil, and I need to do my younger son now. But I think it's like with every vaccine, there are risks, and some people may develop severe risks and other people may not. But I think generally it is an extremely safe vaccine, and there are very few side effects. Like I say, there may be the odd one. I have looked it up before Ethan had his and read. And I mean, you can, if you Google, you can read some scary stuff that's put on by anti-vaxxers, that will try and say it is bad and your child can die and you get, all of this stuff. But I honestly believe that vaccinations are highly effective and go through all the safety and efficacy tests, and this vaccine is very safe. And like I say, the Gardasil now, they've even got a more advanced one out that is, offers more protection, as it's developed. So I honestly don't think you need to be concerned. It's like any medication that you take. You get a pamphlet and all the, with all the side effects that could occur. And I mean, if you have to read all of those all the time and think that's going to happen to you, I honestly don't think that it is a problem, But I think, to just make yourself aware, and obviously because the vaccines are in 3 doses, sort of at separate intervals. I can't remember exactly, how long between. I think it's a month and then 6 weeks or slightly longer in between each of the vaccines. And it's a fairly painful vaccine, but then, Etan said he was absolutely fine after that. He didn't feel anything at all.
Okay.
Now that's rather worth, and I think it is so imperative that everyone that does have it, because like I say, it can eliminate this cancer.
Yeah, and as you said, this is one cancer that you actually can prevent.
Can eliminate, yeah, exactly.
Most other cancers that you actually don't have control over. So very interesting.
Exactly.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Do we have any questions for Nicole so far? Anything that we can ask Nicole? No?
Everybody's very happy with you, Nicole, so far.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there's anything else. I think I've covered most.
We've covered the symptoms, we've covered the causes, we've covered the types, we've covered the risk factors, which was great. The prevention we've done.
Yeah, like you said here. I mean, definitely. Smoking is a risk, as they say here. Smoking is a risk. Poor economic status, that's what we've already mentioned, because of low middle incomes not having access to screening as much. They also say, and then of course, if you've got a low immune system, which I've mentioned with the HPV, so if you have a low immune system, you're more at risk. And then of course, like I say, sexual education and to make sure you practice safe sex. And then they also say here, I think so that's covered all of the risk factors.
Yep.
I think basically that's most of the staging.
I think we've covered most of that. If we do have any questions, we can always come back to Nicole with that. Nicole, whilst we have you on, and those that are going to be listening to the audio a little bit later, I think it's important to also share the cancer navigation you mentioned earlier, and as we've mentioned before, Nicole's our cancer navigator. Perhaps, Nicole, what we can do is tell our listeners about the role that you play in coming into contact with someone that's been diagnosed, and how you can assist them on their journey from finding, after being diagnosed, to getting treatment, and to going through treatment, and then obviously going into survivorship. Just that journey of how a cancer navigator can assist, and what they can assist with from a practical point of view, and the medical side of it. If you can just touch a little bit about that as well.
Okay, so patient navigation is to assist a patient, their families and their caregivers, and help them to overcome the many barriers that you faced when you are diagnosed with cancer. And, it needs to be from the beginning of treatment, through your treatment, into survivorship, and then, we even do end-of-life navigating. And, it is just so imperative, as a breast cancer survivor myself, is, you definitely need to have support, and I can't emphasize this enough, right from the beginning, because the moment that you hear the words "you have cancer," you go into shock, and you're totally overwhelmed, and you almost shut down. And that's where it's just so important for a navigator to step in and to be able to then assist that patient. So right from that first, that diagnosis, I think, to be able to be in, if possible, and it's not always possible, in the consult with the patient, so that you either sitting taking notes or you're recording the session. And once the patient, like I say, they're so overwhelmed, they don't hear half of what's been said, to then, when the patient is more ready and sort of accepted, to then sit down with the patient and to go over everything again and explain to them the situation. And I mean, then, so you go from that diagnosis, which I think is so important. And then, of course, it's to start treatment. And of course, that is also, it's another whole, what goes through your mind is you're suddenly thrown into this world where you've never known all of this, and suddenly you've got to, all these crazy medical terms and hectic treatments and that you don't know much about. So, that is where as a navigator you come in. So from that diagnosis to explain to them, to try and calm them down, to counsel them, and then to prepare them for treatment. And then, of course, there's all the treatment phases, which consist of surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, immunotherapy, targeted therapy, and endocrine therapy. And not everyone has all of the treatments. It obviously depends on, your stage and, what type of cancer. And then, treatment is just so scary. I mean, as so many patients will know, when you hear, when you hear the words, you've got to have chemotherapy, it freaks so many people out, because it is a very, difficult journey, and it's very daunting to face chemo. And just to be able to sit down with the patient and explain to them what is going to happen, answer their questions, tell them how it works. And then, of course, is to prepare them, because there's so many side effects and long and late term effects. And, the patient becomes, depressed. They have poor, they lose their self-esteem. They have poor body image, if they've had hectic surgery. So, I mean, the whole point of navigation is just to guide the patient through each of those stages and to provide them with information and support, through the journey. And then, once your treatment's complete, so often they call it lost in transition. And, some people, your treatment stops abruptly. Other patients, it might continue. You might be on endocrine therapy or, for years after that, or, you might be on Herceptin for a little bit longer than the chemo. And I haven't got time to explain everything to the patients. And again, the navigator can come in, and I think it's so important that they be made aware of all the side effects, the long-term effects, which, there can be some severe long-term and late effects from the treatments again. And, the patients need psychosocial support. They need, they just need guidance, and they need to have a purpose. And I think then going into survivorship, which is I'm very passionate about, because like I say, as your treatment, ends and you're suddenly not going to your doctors anymore, you're not getting that medical support from your oncologist and your surgeons, everything's complete. And you almost become totally lost, and you actually don't know what to do. And I think survivorship care is so important. What they do is they provide survivorship care plans. So you can actually sit down with the patient, and you can, again, it's to recommend, educate, and support them, psychologically, to refer them to support groups, to exercise groups, to actually teach them to self-advocate and take charge of the rest of their journey by, continuing with their checkups and their adherence to medications. And I think it's just so important. And, a lot of patients, if you just say to them, you're just speaking to them and you say, okay, this is what you need to do. But now in the States, they've actually brought in where survivorship care plan should be provided. So when you complete your treatment and, you take a whole history of the patient. And so the whole story, and then you can go from there and recommend what you think they need to be. So either, I would then say, okay, if, would you like to join a support group? Are you interested in that? Do you want one-on-one? Would you prefer one-on-one treatment for mental health issues or psychological issues if you've really been impacted badly and you feel you need support? There's cancer coaches like Michelle, which can also have a huge benefit. You can, recommend physios, exercise specialists, OT therapists. There's so much that you can do, and I think it also helps the patients to have a purpose, and to find something that can take their their focus off the cancer. I mean, as a cancer survivor, even if you are in remission and your cancer doesn't ever come back, there's always that possibility, and at the back of your mind, there's always, that concern that it could happen. So just because you've survived, it doesn't mean to say that you're absolutely fine now and you don't need all the support. Sometimes you need the support more. So that's basically navigation in a nutshell. And then also, part of, I actually didn't mention, when they're preparing younger, as we spoke with this whole thing with fertility and VitaLab, I think it is so often neglected that young cancer patients who are, often I think they're so overwhelmed, they don't even think about it when they get told that they're diagnosed. They don't think about, when they have treatment that possibly could cause infertility. And, as a navigator, that's also part of your job, is to educate the younger patients and make them aware. And I think what's so important, and I'll never forget with Carol, she'll often say cancer is 99.9%, it is not an emergency. And a lot of oncologists will say, no, but we need to start treatment. You didn't have time to, you haven't got time to do the fertility procedures. And that is not correct. I mean, if your oncologist is really concerned about you and that issue, that's why I say, to go for onco-fertility, and they have their own counseling and preparation. They can put 99.9% of the cancer treatments on hold so that you can go through the fertility and have egg retrieval or whatever you need to have. And I think, that is also, part of navigation. And then also to make patients aware of clinical trials. I think in South Africa, we forget about that often, and not many people are aware of clinical trials. And I mean, in South Africa, we're very far behind the States, obviously, when it comes to clinical trials. I mean, they have a huge amount of clinical trials available, and in state we have limited. But a lot of the private oncology centers, they know of all the clinical trials, and often the oncologists also forget that. I think unless you're in a position where it might be your last hope, or the oncologists don't often discuss clinical trials. So that's another thing that you can prepare the patients through your navigation, is to make them aware. So there's just so much that you can make. So much information you can give the patient. And then it's also just providing evidence-based resources, so that you don't just go and Google, because so often you just go and everything it throws up so much stuff, and you don't actually know what is what is medically evidence-based or not. So I mean, because I've built up a huge library now of medical resources. So a lot of the patients, when they do contact me and I say, would you like information on chemotherapy, radiation, I mean, I can tell them, but then I've also got amazing fact sheets. I mean, a lot of the American organizations, American Society for Oncology, have amazing fact sheets that, there's amazing websites. So, I mean, if you just put the patients and, you give them that information, it also helps them to learn to look out for themselves, and like I say, to self-advocate, and to to go and do that research. And then at least they know they're getting proper evidence-based research, not just stuff that Google stuff that throws up a lot of stuff that's not relevant.
Yeah, no, definitely.
I think that's
And I think, John, you wanted to mention exercise, the importance of.
Then of course, yeah, I mean, I should be saying that. I mean, part of survivorship, of course, is, exercise. And I mean, for me, from a physical, mental, psychosocial perspective, exercise is so highly recommended. And, it should be, it also is actually part of the survivorship care plan in the States. And a lot of the big oncology centers in America, that run the survivorship care and have the plans, have specific exercise. They have all the exercise specialists available for the patient. So you can, have your treatment, and, you can go to exercise classes, have physios available, have OTs available. All of that is, is so important. And, a lot of people think, well, there's no ways I can exercise during treatment. But the benefits of exercise, like I say, psychosocially, mentally, during treatment, it helps with reduction of cancer reoccurrence. It has huge impact on the reduction of side effects of the treatment. If you are active, it just makes you feel so much better mentally It can help with pain, pain relief if the endorphin release and the dopamine, if you are exercising. I think so many patients will attest to that. I mean, just the mental impact. And I mean, I had an absolute remarkable recovery from my surgery because I was fit initially, and I started training, fairly quickly afterwards. And I mean, my side effects on tamoxifen are minimal. And look, everybody experiences different side effects, and some people have a lot, some people don't have many. I mean, I have literally had one side effect from my tamoxifen, and I mean, Prof. Ben will say she should because of my fitness, and I've maintained my fitness, and it's just it really does make a difference. And like I say, at Philoptima, we really need to try and build up and promote exercise and make patients aware. And I think the biggest thing is that most normal people find exercise daunting and to start exercise. We all know that it's tough to start an exercise program, and you've got to be disciplined. And I mean, that is the key, consistency and discipline. And I think the big mistake people make is that they start too quickly, or they're not guided enough. So they'll go out and try and run 10 Ks in one go without stopping. And then they're so sore for 2 days after that, it puts them off. Or, they try and do some core exercises and they don't do them correctly, and it makes them very stiff. And I mean, I think, people need to be made aware that you are going to hurt, and, you've got to push yourself through that. But I think for cancer patients, often because you are maybe, because of the whole journey you've been through, you don't have a lot of self-esteem, you're lacking in confidence, you have body image issues. I think it's so important to be able to offer them, someone who understands cancer, an exercise specialist who knows cancer, understands cancer, and can give them options. Not everyone likes running. And I mean, there's so many different forms of exercise. And I think then, they need to be tailored to each client or personal goals, needs, and abilities. So if they don't like running, try something else. And I think patients need to be made aware of that. And I mean, I think to have an exercise class for ladies or breast cancer survivors is great, because they've all got a lot in common. They've all been through it together, and there's just not enough of that out there. But I also find, and it's interesting, Prof. Ben and her survivorship, Dr. Inga Creel, when I, became quite passionate and I did my exercise training course, and Carol was so, so happy for me and so keen, that I do promote it. And I mean, they both said to me, though, it is so difficult to get cancer patients and survivors to exercise. So they almost said, well, good luck with that. But, this is what they find, that it's very difficult. So I think we need to try and change that. I mean,
for sure. We'll definitely try and change the way we use fitness and exercise, especially around cancer survivors and patients. That's a topic that we're going to
there's even scientific research papers of during treatment, like putting patients on the treadmill. And look, I mean, I was lucky enough that I didn't experience chemotherapy, but I'm sure Drika and the other patients can tell you. I mean, I know you go through terrible times where you're really feeling bad, and I mean, I think it's also, you need to be made aware if you're really not up to it, and, you have, bad side effects, and, there's certain things, like if you have a temperature, if you have neutropenia, if you have thrombocytopenia, all of those, you make sure you do not exercise. So and I think the big thing is also to teaching patients to listen to their bodies. So I mean, for the second day after chemo, you might feel so terrible, but so then obviously you're not going to go and try and do extreme exercise. But I think what can benefit is to maybe try and get outside just in the fresh air and just walk in your garden or go for a walk down the road, if you can. I think a lot of patients and a lot of oncologists almost like say, well, there's no ways you should exercise. And that is actually not the case. Even oncologists need to be trained, need to be, taught that, exercise is so beneficial. Look, it is now, and nowadays it's more and more. But I think there still are some, oncologists and surgeons and things that are very conservative when it comes to exercising. Like even post-surgery, depending on if you're having, there's some quite hectic reconstructive procedures. that, you know, they take muscle from other parts of your body. And so, you know, for a long time, you've got to be extremely careful. But if you have an exercise professional like the course I did, you know, once you're cleared by your doctor, to have someone then guide you. And I mean, another big thing is lymphedema, you know, which is can be caused by surgery, sentinel node biopsies, auxiliary node dissection is the big one, and lymph and radiation. It's so important to be able to teach the patient's awareness of, you know, to look out for lymphedema, and to do, there's some very basic exercises which stimulate the lymphatic system. You know, deep breathing and meditation benefits the lymphatic system a lot as well. And, you know, very mild movements and exercises that you can just do. You know, I'll maybe do that for the Wings of Hope course. You know, there's some really basic stuff that people are not aware of, and it can just make such a huge difference. So yeah, that is navigation. It's very extensive, and, you know, it covers everything. And then, you know, after survivorship, you know, there's the end of life situation as well, which is also very difficult. And I think for me, from what I've heard, and also to make patients aware of palliative care and hospice care, and, you know, there's such a big fallacy about palliative care. You know, people say palliative care is end of life care, and that is totally not the case. Palliative care can be used right from the beginning of your treatment. So, you know, if you want additional support with a palliative care doctor who can, you know, also provide information on better quality of life and pain control and psychosocial support. I mean, it's just so important, you know, that I think in today's day and age, you do not need to be in pain if you have cancer. And I mean, I think in a lot of cases with metastatic cancer patients who, you know, the treatment is no longer curative and it's to maintain quality of life, they particularly need to be taught and, you know, informed about palliative care, and that pain control is so important, that you don't need to be in pain, and you shouldn't be in pain. I mean, it's against your human rights to actually be in pain. So I think palliative care is another one. And I've actually got my husband's very good, one of his very good associates who's now in Australia, Dale's actually a prosthodontist. His son is a palliative care specialist. He's got a private practice at Morningside. And I was just thinking, I think I must contact Craig, and maybe we can do a webinar on palliative care, you know, with someone like him, who, you know, Craig Howes, who's actually a specialist in that. And we can give people a, you know, clearer picture on palliative care, that it's not end of life care, you know. And then I think also with oncologists and families, when it comes to end of life care, or is communication. You know, often the family won't accept a diagnosis. You know, when the patient might accept that they're not going to live for much longer, but the family refuses to accept that, and they will like get really upset if the patient wants to stop treatment. And I think it's so imperative that there's that communication, and that the oncologists are also honest, because, you know, often the oncologists, I think they feel bad that they've now got to say that, you know, this is no longer, there's nothing more we can do now, and it's now sort of the end. And I mean, of course, it's so traumatic for everybody, but I think communication is so key, that the patient is aware, the family is aware, and that, of course, it's that everyone should actually respect the patient's decisions, you know. And I think to make simple things, to make sure that the patients, you know, their financial affairs are in order, you know, their last wishes, if they've got advance directives or living wills, that everything's in order, you know, that their choice of not continuing with treatment. You know, you read of all these extremely wonderful new treatments that for metastatic patients that might, you know, keep them going for 3 months longer. And often there's so many bad side effects that during those 3 months, their quality of life is so bad that it's actually not worth it. And I think that communication needs to be, you know, for the patients and their families, they need to be informed of all of these so that they can make choices, you know, the correct choices. And then even just things like, you know, respecting their wishes and, you know, giving them support. And, you know, there's an American navigator who heads up the ANN navigation, Lily D. Shockney, and she's also a breast cancer survivor herself. And she was one of the developers of breast cancer patient navigation and the ANN oncology nurse and patient navigator. And, you know, she says there's so many nice things that you can do, and for family members that are at end of life and they need a little bit of something to look forward to. So, and things that they can manage. So, like a special family function or a retreat with other metastatic patients, or, like one example is making like small achievable goals. So if they're still fairly healthy, and to attend a graduation ceremony, so they've got something to look forward to, or a 21st or a wedding, or to almost like give them motivation, to have like a purpose is so important. She always says, and I mean, one quite nice thing she says is to even suggest to them, when they know that they might not be around for much longer, is to like write cards, if they're for future events of grandchildren, for a 21st coming up or a graduation, and, to just write a special card, and then that card is put away for that relative. And then, when the time comes to be given to that relative, and it's like a special memory. So, there's so many nice things that I've actually learned from AONN and all of these journals and webinars and things that you can have for patients. And that's why I just think it's so imperative. Navigation is just so imperative, and I just hope we can build it more, and that everyone is entitled to to have it.
Yeah, for sure. Some questions, John?
No real questions. Just a comment, Nicole. Thank you very much. I think you've bombarded us with so much information with regards to navigation. And I think we're pretty excited to have you on board formally. We haven't announced it officially yet, but those of you that are listening, under Philotimor, we're going to create our own F navigation program, and Nicole's going to head it up. And we're looking to take on board other navigators and to create more awareness around that project. So we're really excited. And we're also excited to launch our Philotimor fitness side of things, which we're going to have on board shortly. And Nicole, you'll hopefully be joining us as far as that's concerned, to bring your expertise and added value. So yeah, fantastic session. I've learned a heck of a lot. Any questions, Drika, Bobby? Anybody got a quick question or a comment?
Deshi, a question? No?
No questions, no comments.
Drika, can I ask you, during your journey, did you find exercise to be something that you wanted to do or not want to do? Drika, for those who are listening, Drika is also one of our Philotimor Cancer champions, and she's on board. I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, but it's interesting to hear from a champion's point of view.
I see.
Was exercise something that you considered or not at all?
In the first few weeks of chemo, after the first initial chemo doses, exercise was not really possible. But as the weeks progressed, it became important for me to just keep going as normal as I could, to try and just get normalcy in my life. But it was not the easiest thing, and I tried to do it at a slow pace just to get myself into things. But afterwards, when I stopped chemo, I actually went bigger and got into rebounding and all that stuff. So that really helped me.
Oh wow, that's awesome to hear. That's interesting. And it does.
No, and that's what, like I say, Evie, I mean, I think it's so important, like Drika says, you need to start slowly. You need to be advised. Often you don't have a clue of, how to start or how to begin, and you just need someone to advise you. And like I say, it all depends on the individual. Some people you get crazy athletes that will train right through chemo. I mean, even if they're half dead, a lot of people say to me, I mean, it's easy for you to say, because I have been an athlete my whole life. Exercise is so much part of my life, and it's almost like easy, and I can't actually survive without it. But it's different, and everybody is so different, and I think that is the most important thing is each individual is different, and they need a specific exercise plan, and they need to find what they like, what they enjoy the most. I think that's so important.
Yeah. And from our fellow director down at the bottom of my screen, Deshi, any questions about exercise that you'd like to just ask Nicole?
No, all good. Just don't like doing that.
So, Nicole,
very difficult to get into.
person we're going to have to work on is our fellow director, Deshi. There, we're going to have to just motivate her to do a group. We'll do a Philotimo group fitness challenge. Desh?
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah.
If I'll be with you, I'm going to start that 5K every Saturday, okay? How far we get.
Are you doing your 5K every day, Evie?
No, I wish I could do it for every day. I try and do it once a week. And in between the rest of the week, I try and do a lot more walking. But yeah, I must say, I really am enjoying the challenge of trying to get to that 5 kilometer without collapsing. But yeah, let's see how it goes.
Yeah.
I think we should do that this Saturday, challenge ourselves to that.
That's it.
Yeah.
Challenge up for the weekend. I like that idea. Hey, John?
Love it. We're starting this Saturday, Desh.
No problem. Does carrying boxes help?
It does indeed. Yes, it
Does
does.
having what? Having what?
Carrying
Just trying to make
boxes.
excuses for not.
Yes, yeah. That they even say for cancer patients initially after your surgery, you shouldn't do too much, but just like activities of daily living to start off with. Like even going to the shops and instead of taking a lift, walking up the stairs or parking your car on the other side of the car park. That's all. It all benefits. They call it activities of daily living, mowing the lawn, gardening, all that kind of stuff, and even just walking your dog. I mean, that's all a start.
I agree, 100%.
Yeah.
So, any other questions that we can ask Nicole before we close off? Anything else? Bobby, you've been very quiet in the background. Nice to have you on board with us again. Bobby's joined us from Cancer. Hi, Bobby. Sorry,
your sound's off.
We can't hear him. Hold on a second.
I think it's his. Yes.
There we are.
There we go.
Now we
I
can
find it very interesting, really.
Cool.
Yeah, and what Nicole was saying earlier about cervical cancer sort of almost becoming outdated overseas is amazing,
exactly.
But it's also scary because that's where most of our research and stuff is done.
Yeah, that's also true.
Yeah. No, it was just very interesting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We're glad that you found it informative. And please, if you wanting to listen to the audio again, it's available on our website. So we're going to be closing off. I think a huge thank you to our Cancer Navigator, Nicole, for sharing this information with us, our listeners, Bobby and Trika, and my fellow directors, John and Desh, for joining us today. A little bit of a fun session. We got to chat a little bit about the cervical cancer, but also cancer navigation, the importance thereof. And please, if anybody is listening to this audio, you can make contact with our foundation if you are looking for the services of a cancer navigator. Nicole is available on email. Her email address is nicole@philotimor.org.za. Alternatively, all our information is on our website, where you can find it on www.philotimor.org.za. Please make contact with us. We are here to help whichever way we can. We have lots of professionals on board that can assist any cancer survivor on any journey that they have, from breast to lung to colon to brain, childhood cancers. We are able to facilitate all advice surrounding those fields. So please feel free to message us, email us, contact us. We are here to help. So from my side, huge thank you to everybody. I wish you all a lovely week ahead, and hopefully the weather will clear up for us on the weekend. Please, guys, be safe. Remember to adhere to all COVID regulations. Let's try and keep those numbers down, keep us safe so that we can all be here again next week. And yeah, John, ending off on your side?
No, thanks so much, guys. Lovely to see you all again, and looking forward to another session next week on Let's Get Chatty with Evie and John. See you guys soon. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
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 Bye. Bye.